I'm sure everyone has noticed that there is a cost of living crunch going on. How could you possibly miss it? It feels like the cost of everything is going up, and the cost of fuel is no exception. Someone who's trying to draw attention to the fact that actually a very significant proportion of the cost of fuel is in fact tax is David Limbrick MP from Victoria, a friend of the show. Welcome back, David.
Thanks for having me.
Look, this was actually brought back to my attention. Obviously, I'm aware that this is a thing, but you actually posted about this recently on social media, and I'm grateful that you did. You make a great point here. For every litre of petrol or diesel you put in your car, you pay almost 50 cents in excise tax and then pay GST on top of that. Obviously, that has cost of living implications. Do you think this is one of the things that the government ought to be doing in response to the cost of living crisis?
Well, yes, if you cast your mind back to during the pandemic, the government actually cut excise tax in half for a limited period of time.
Yes.
We were pressuring them to try and make that permanent, but they didn't. But everyone knows that the cost of petrol feeds into your car when you fill it up, of course, and that affects your cost of living. But what a lot of people don't think about is especially the diesel and how that affects distribution, because people have been complaining about the cost of things at supermarkets. Well, one of the things that feeds into that cost is diesel, because every supermarket needs to truck stuff around, and that if that's more expensive, then that means the cost of goods are more expensive, and a large proportion of that is tax.
Well, I jumped onto the Parliamentary Budget Office's website to try and wrap my head a bit more around this issue and around this particular tax. You can download this report for yourself if you want to have a look at it. Now, I've grabbed a quote here. It's in very, very small writing. I didn't have a choice as to how it displayed on the screen. So let me just get this up for you. One moment. It's gone very small on my screen as well. There it is. Right, apologies for that. The excise and customs duty on petroleum fuel is one of the oldest taxes in Australia, applying since Federation in 1901. For some of that time, and this is the crucial bit, there has been a link between the amount of excise raised and road funding. The formal link to road funding most recently ceased in 1992. Since then, fuel tax has been a general revenue-raising tax with only a minor link with the Australian government's overall level of road funding. David, I think a lot of people would be quite surprised to discover that there actually isn't a direct link, that this is actually just general revenue.
Yeah, a lot of people have this idea that it's, there to set aside to build roads and maintain roads and all this sort of stuff. But as you point out, that was actually, I think it was found unconstitutional to have that revenue hypothecated. So it just goes into general revenue. And going forward, this is going to be a problem that I know the government's already thinking about, is if you have that idea that it's going to be funding roads, at least partially, then what happens with electric vehicles? Because, and this is something that the government's already thinking about, because they don't pay this excise tax at all.
And they can be very, very heavy vehicles that cause a considerable amount of damage to roads as well. Now, you mentioned the court case, the 1992 ruling that put an end to the hypothecation of this particular tax. There was also a court ruling around the constitutional validity of states charging their own fuel excise. It used to be that they had their own separate to the federal one. That was ended because it was found to be unconstitutional. I want to come back to the constitutionality in just 1 second. A quick fact here, this is $18.2 billion or 3.2% of total budget revenue. So this is a fairly high stakes issue here. Back to the issue of constitutionality. There is in our constitution a double taxation clause that you cannot be charged a tax on a tax. Now, we are being charged a tax on a tax in the form of the fuel excise being applied federally and then GST being charged on top of that. My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer, is that courts have said that that's okay because they're not both taxes.
Well, whether or not a lawyer thinks it's a tax, I don't know. But I think it's a tax. It's a tax because, it's a tax. And it does seem crazy that it's double taxed as well, that you pay GST on top of it. Surely they could, maybe that's another thing they could do to ease cost of living, is make diesel and petrol GST free to make up for the fact that it's double taxed. Interestingly, this constitutional issue came up again recently in Victoria, because Victoria in the last term of Parliament put in a new fee for electric vehicle users based on the amount of kilometres that they drove. And this was challenged in court and found to be unconstitutional, and that tax got scrapped.
Yeah, well, back to the constitutionality of double taxation. You think that excise is a tax. I certainly think that excise is a tax. This is a direct screen grab from the Parliamentary Budget Office. They clearly think that fuel excise is a tax because they say, and I quote, "Fuel excise is a tax." That seems fairly clear cut to me. I find it very,
Well,
very
if it's
difficult.
not a tax, what is it? I don't know what it is if it's not a tax.
Even the Parliamentary Budget Office is in furious agreement with both of us on this point, David. Now, excise is an interesting thing because it's often used as a form of punishment by governments. We see excise is applied to alcohol consumption on the basis that alcohol consumption leads to costs elsewhere, and so the government justifies it in that way and uses it to discourage people from drinking as much. Same with tobacco tax. It creates costs for our healthcare system, although as has been pointed out in the past, the tobacco excise raises multiple times more than the costs that can be attributed to it. So it's become a method by which governments are trying to nudge us. Do you think that's true of the fuel excise as well? In a net zero world where they're trying to move in that direction, is the excise now more about behaviour modification?
Oh, look, I think there's a lot of people on the left that would love it to go higher. I don't see anyone from the Greens calling for fuel excise to be lowered. In fact, I hear them complaining that farmers get a diesel rebate. One of the subsidies that they keep claiming is this diesel rebate, excise rebate, for miners and farmers, and it's effectively to make up for the fact that miners and farmers use a lot of diesel, but they actually don't use it on roads. They use it on tractors, on private land in mines and things like that. So they want more tax.
Yeah, calling a tax refund a subsidy is stretching the English language beyond breaking point. You've just recently returned from some travels, and this particular post of yours, excuse me, made me quite angry. I'm going to be honest, David. I was pretty annoyed to see this. So this is David Limbrick MP travelling and enjoying the finer things in life, saying exactly the same product imported from the United States. In Japan, it's about Australian $20. In Australia, it's about $50. Most of the cost in Australia is tax. Is that literally true that more than half of a bottle of spirits could be tax?
Yes, it is. If you go and check you can calculate it yourself how much the tax is. They charge, it's close to $100 per litre that's per litre of pure alcohol. So if you've got Jack Daniels, which is 40% alcohol, you can calculate it, and yes, it's a lot of tax. And look, it's nuts. And I was the same as you. I thought it was funny at first when I was looking at liquor stores in Japan, but when I saw that bottle of Jack Daniels for $20, I'm scratching my head and saying, why is it so cheap in Japan? And it's just tax, basically.
Well, we're certainly being taxed out the wazoo. I've been saying for some years now, and I know that you're on the same page here, that many people mistakenly believe the most expensive thing that they pay for in their life is their house. In actual fact, the most expensive thing that you pay for every year is your government. And cost of living crisis, it strikes me that the government should be the one reducing how much it costs us in order to try and bring the cost of living under control. Well, David Limbrick MP, thank you so much for drawing this issue back to my attention, reminding me of it, and for helping to bring this story to our viewers here on the Aussie Wire. Thank you.
Cheers.